Dr. Garcia, welcome. I want to welcome everyone to Sports Doc Talk. I'm Will Sanchez, along with our orthopedic sports medicine surgeon, top doctor, you name it. It's great. I'm already rambling. We said, oh, there's not going to be an hour. It's not going to be an hour, but I'm rambling. We're going to talk Olympics and Olympic injuries, and we're going to get into all of this stuff. But we have our gold medalist, top doctor right now, winning it every single year, Dr. Grant Garcia. I know I'm blowing smoke right now, but listen, it's summertime. We have the Olympics. Before we get into all that, how are you doing? How are the kids doing? Is everyone having a good time this summer?
Yeah, summer's awesome. Usually summer's not super busy, but this year, for some reason, everyone's enjoying sports. I think it may be the pre-Olympics chaos that happens. And then we're gonna have that post-Olympic chaos. Everyone's gonna start signing up for swimming and track and field,
That's right. Yeah.
soccer. We get the swim team gets like triple the volume after they see the Olympics, and you see Michael Phelps, and now you see all the new swimmers going on there. So it'll be cool. But yeah, summer's been good. We finally got some 80s. Now it's back down to 66. I don't know what's going on, but we'll figure it out. Somebody will figure it out.
It's only a couple days. The Seattle
I
Lights
know.
needed
Well,
their
dude, we're such
their
complainers.
crowds.
We waited months for this.
Yes, we did. And listen, before we go on, let's give a quick shout out to the Recovery Shop. Dr. Garcia, I'll tee you up for that one there. Talk a little bit about the Recovery Shop.
So these are our sponsors. Big thank you to them. I love this stuff. You guys, reach out to me, reach out to the Recovery Shop link above. This is really good for the patients. Your patients are asking me. I had someone today came in asking me, what can they do after their surgery? What extras do we offer? They've been hearing about the standard stuff, but the NICE machine, recovery nutrition,
Yep.
The Rebus machine, all those things we can offer them that, you normally can't get. And this allows you as a surgeon to offer them to your patients kind of in a one big bundled option. They can see it all there. And what's really nice too is just got kind of tired of telling people, go to Amazon, buy this brace, buy this aftermarket thing. Instead, I can vet it. We can put it up there, and it can be really helpful for the patients. So for patients, you can reach out and find out who's dealing with the Recovery Shop. But really for surgeons, it's really the key is because it allows your patients to get everything, quick access and good quality items. So I strongly recommend. Feel free. You can reach out to me on my website, on the Sports Doc website, or reach out directly to Recovery Shop. Again, there's no benefit to us if you go from any of those links. So do whatever works for you. But hopefully it'll work for you. So thanks, guys.
Yeah. And for those that are listening, it's shop-recovery.net, or you can find it on our website at Sports Doc Talk. And what's great about that, and we're going to let this go in a second, but you mentioned it, right? We've been talking about the NICE machine. We've been talking about Rebus for the last year, probably longer. So this just kind of, just validates all the things that we've been talking about. And the benefit is the patients. So we just want to give a quick shout out to the Recovery Shop and thank them for being a partner with us. And more importantly, they're there to assist the recovery of the patient. Listen, it's Olympic time, baby. The Olympics have started. I hope no one in my job is listening, right? So I had a really busy week. I had a bunch of shows. We did all these shows, and then I've been working from home. And I got to say, I got the Peacock app going. It's called the gold channels, like the red zone, the gold zone. And they have the red zone guys on there doing it. It's like the octo box, and we've got gymnastics and volleyball, and I'm going bananas over here. And I'm trying not to spill the beans because if in the chat with the team, they're going to know that I'm watching the Olympics, but I've been so excited about the Olympics. Have you had a chance to watch any of the Olympics going on?
I watched a little bit of them, but I need to do this. I clearly am working too hard. I need to get on your ring.
You do.
Even though I know you work so hard, I got to get the gold box, whatever it is. We're going to do Peacock. It's a great idea.
The Peacock app, man. I got it last year for the football season. They try to trick us into watching a playoff game, and then I got a great deal, and I was like, whatever, I'll pick it up. And now, all of the games are on it, so totally worth it. And by the way, you know how we do, right? We usually do some stats, especially when it's just you and I, right? When we have our guests, we kind of get right into it. Don't worry about it. We're not doing trivia yet. We're not doing trivia yet, but we'll give you the stat, right? So the 2024 Summer Olympics in Paris, right? They have the surfing competition in Tahiti, which is 9,750 miles away from the host city, which makes it the farthest distance between an Olympic and event and the host city. So for those that don't know where Tahiti is, it's in the French Polynesia and it's super far. So you're watching Olympic at night, and then you've got surfing going on during the day.
Mm.
There's been some really cool photos out there, and I think I'm really jealous because I don't want to surf because I'm not messing with those waves, but I can with a chair and some sand and a cooler, maybe a little sunblock and a sand castle, something like that. That's probably my speed right there. So when I look at everybody at the beach, that's kind of where I'm wishing I was.
Yeah, I think you would enjoy it. We went to that spot about a year and a half ago. But you know what that way, you know, that area is called, it's called something of skulls.
And
So
no,
I'm not
no,
really
thank
sure
you.
that's, so I'm
No,
not really sure that. So what they didn't say, I just read an article on it, is I actually have a few stats. So today I'm going to school you. So I
all
think it was
right, let's go.
1950. The last time they had an Olympics and there was an event that far away was equestrian in Australia, because they can't have such a long quarantine. So they can't have the horses actively in Australia doing the competition. So they did it in somewhere, I think in Scotland or in London or in England somewhere.
Yeah,
And so that was the last time this has happened. But what's super cool is, you know, just the ability that they're doing this so far away.
yeah.
But the waves are so dangerous there that like
No,
people have died. There's multiple deaths on this wave that we're doing. So this is just insanity. But you know, that place is beautiful, and I hope they get a little. We know we might be finding some of those athletes stuck in Bora Bora for a little while, unfortunately.
yeah, yeah, quote unquote, unfortunate. And listen, here we go. We're going off the beaten path already. For those that don't know, Dr. Garcia is a maniac when it comes to planning his vacations. So we need to find a section at sportsdoctalk.com where Garcia can share. He has an itinerary planned out. My next vacation, I'm just going to tee Dr. Garcia up because he's going to tell me where to go, when to go, whatever we need to do. So I'm pretty sure you should at least post the Tahiti one because you probably have a 23-page document there for your travels. So can we get that on the website?
Dude, seriously, that's my best kept secret. Nobody
No,
knows about this.
I'm
You just
shouting
unleashed
it out.
this.
It's
You just
tremendous.
totally unlocked it. Yeah, my partners steal my spreadsheets for my trips. You know, my friends steal my spreadsheet for my trips. But listen, the audience needs to know. I vacation like I do my surgeries. I go all out, making sure
Yep.
to do the best possible job.
All right.
And there's no chill mode. It's everything we plan to the T, make it perfect. And it's fun. We like to do it wild. I like to not. I'm not ever. You already seen. We've seen my surgeries. We like to do.
Yep.
You know, there's not a lot of repetition. So anyhow, so will that be another show? You already got enough information out of me on that one.
No, no, we're that show will probably be a 4 hour show. We'll do 4 parts on all of the planning that goes into it. Real quick before we move on, see this we're off the tangent. Where are we? 10 minutes in, 8 minutes in. Does your wife love it, or is she like, okay, this is you're over planning? Like, there's a delicate balance. What's the deal? Because I know when we try to plan things out, there's a delicate balance. Like, okay, we overloaded the schedule or we underloaded. What's that key balance, and how does your wife feel about the way you go about planning these trips?
So I usually catch her off guard. That's the key. So she's
Oh,
tired at night. She's had too much with the kids. And I'm like, hey, honey, do you want to go to Vietnam? And she'll be like, yeah, yeah, sure, sure. And I'll be like, she said yes. And
done.
then she wakes up and the trip's fully booked for her. So that is a positive. We've started doing conversations before, like a few weeks before, so she knows where we're going. Because a lot of times she's landed and she's like, I don't really know where this is. Like, you know, there's certain places that we have like, what's the next step we're going? So, you know, most people, it's funny, you know, because of my job, they think that I'm like not the vacation guy. So it's the exact opposite in our family. Like she likes it, but she's obviously stressed. Be honest with you, her job's harder than mine with the two little rascals.
Yeah.
So, you know, it's fun. But yeah, you know, we have it, it's a good time and she likes it. It's just it becomes intense. Sometimes you're tired after the vacation, but then the memories are worth it. So
All right. Well, you're the Olympic champion of planning. Speaking of another Olympic champion, that is, I mean, she's to me, and I'm going to ask you who is your top Olympian. For me, I have Jesse Owens as one of the top Olympians ever because of not only him winning, but at the time that it happened, where he did it. the circumstances. Like to me, I put it under a much bigger umbrella, and I have a couple others that fall under my. These are my goats. But before I continue with that, who is your goat when it comes to Olympic Games and what you've experienced in your life?
So again, there are a lot of ones that stand out, but I mean, I'm kind of biased, man. I'm a swimmer,
You're a
so you know where
swimmer.
I'm going with this.
Yes, I
So you
do.
got Michael Phelps. I mean,
Yep.
yeah, to have a swimmer that's his nuts. I mean, I was literally watching, in prep for this show, we were looking up different injuries and trying
Yep.
to see previous injuries, and they showed first pitches, and it's like Michael Phelps, like all talking about Michael Phelps. How can you rock a ponytail and be so cool still?
Yeah.
It's just so impressive.
He
I
looks
mean,
good.
it's
You
just
saw him
he
out there,
does
right?
look, but
He
that's
looks
what
good.
I'm saying. It's not that common that you can do that, and he pulls it off because he's Michael Phelps. I mean, he's the most famous swimmer and probably one of the currently most famous athletes that's not professional swimmer, but he's not like LeBron James, right? He doesn't play in the NBA
Yeah, yeah,
still.
yeah,
He's not still active. He's at every Olympics hosting. And they said that, there was a huge article on this and saying basically like the US is thirsty for another Michael Phelps to make the Olympics cool again. I mean, he's good. There are a lot of good athletes out there, but
yeah.
he just was it was a different animal, right? I can't remember the French guy's name, but they're like, yeah, we have a new Michael Phelps and he doesn't swim for the US. I'm like, that was like the worst possible line you could do,
Yeah,
It's
yeah,
like,
yeah, yeah. There's a
we're
great
missing out.
Australian swimmer. I mean, it all goes through waves of the dominance. But another person that is still active and by far she's the best of the best. When you look at the Kerry Shrugs and the Mary Lou Rettins, I mean, she blows everyone out of the water, and that's Simone Biles. When you have when you're doing tricks in the air that no one else has done, and you have so many things named after you, that alone puts you in a whole other category. She's off and running, and by the time we air this show, she's going to be competing, I believe, in 6 different events. She did sustain a calf injury during her warm-ups at the Paris Olympics. What are some of the concerns when it comes to an elite athlete that is loading that muscle? What's something that's really concerning to you when you hear calf injury? Because when I hear calf injury, I get worried about a whole bunch of other things, not just maybe I'm having some tightness or some soreness. What are some of your concerns?
Well, I mean, you're going to see this a lot in this episode. We talk about all the spectrums, right? Um, Calf injuries are nasty. I mean, they're one of the most annoying, nagging injuries. I mean, we've talked about hamstrings before. We talked about
Yeah,
quad injuries, and you don't get as much in upper extremity. Gymnasts maybe, but they don't get nearly the same injuries you'd think, and they get a lot of these lower extremity because they're having to land at such high velocity, right? Like,
yeah,
I mean, if you look at the height they're going from, and they're landing, and then they land in an endpoint, right? So that's like to drop that and not blow out your Achilles as you land, which we'll
oh,
talk about happens, is pretty impressive. And so the patients that I take care of that have these calf injuries, they're usually not surgical. I mean, we've talked about many football players. This has come up a few times on here talking about
yeah,
these calf injuries, but they're just really, really nagging and they hurt. They hurt a lot. I mean, the most of my patients are coming in with a calf injury. They're limping, they're walking weird. Now, again, I'm assuming she didn't have a really bad strain. I mean, I know she's
yeah,
tough, but
yeah,
probably a grade 1. And again, for the audience, there's usually 3 grades of these tears. Again, there's grade 1, which is just a little sprain. Grade 2, probably hematoma, maybe, which is some blood, maybe a more of a split, and then you have like a full-on rip tear. Probably not a grade 3, probably a grade 1. Again, also depends on where it is, right? We could, we're not going to show that other picture in a minute, but basically you have the muscle, then you have the muscle tendinous junction, and you have the tendon. The tendon is the Achilles tendon. So you can see how this all links together.
yeah,
But you can see when they wrapped her, they wrap her so tight that basically she's not even contracting the muscle. And
yeah.
what they're trying to do with that is to get it so the muscle stays in put, so that when she's landing, it's basically not contracting. But she then loses her spring force. The crazy thing,
She does not lose her spring force. It's wrapped up, and it doesn't affect her. And she's absolutely amazing. I'm sorry to cut you off there.
I think that she's
You-
probably good enough
yeah,
to do it with one foot. That's why.
yeah,
You know what I mean?
yeah,
We've talked about this before, right? Like, it's like some of my patients ask me about professional athletes, and they're like, "Well, what did they get?" I'm like, "Well, just so you know, like I've seen some of these athlete surgeries, and like a lot of the surgeons are great. We've talked about Neil Altrosh,
Yeah,
amazing surgeon, right? Like it's insane article. We have to have an episode just on that article we just read in the what was it, New York Times or something
yeah, yeah,
incredible. But basically, these elite athletes, even if they don't get a great surgery, and I'm not saying they do always, I'm not saying that they don't, but if they don't get a great surgery or they don't get a great treatment, they still can perform better than average. I mean, when I take care of these high level athletes, and if let's say sometimes you come in and these have percentage success, right?
yeah.
They just don't have that same issue. It's just not the same because they're able to overpower whatever they need, and they're able to do it. There's a reason that they're elite, and you're talking about the most elite person, right? So what does it take to get that level? And then the problem is that she's not even what that take to get that level. She's significantly above the rest of the world, right? She has tricks named after her. She's
Yeah,
going for another trick that we've never seen before, right?
yeah,
That she's going to name another one of her tricks.
yeah, yeah.
Um, and so she doesn't even need to be at 100% to win.
Let me ask you about this, right? And once again, we are recording this. If we were going to go live, we would need to get this out in the next 3 hours and 27 minutes because Paris it will start rocking and rolling at midnight Pacific time when they go. So this is going to be a little bit later and halfway through the Olympics when we release this. But her date, and the reason I'm bringing this up because what's your concern if you're the personal trainer and you're like, I'm in charge of the most important calf at the Olympics for gymnastics. July 30th, women's teams final. August 1st, women's all around final. August 3rd, women's vault final. The 4th, uneven bar. The 5th, balance beam finals. And the 5th, floor exercise finals. That is 6 events within 5 days or 6 days. And the last day, she has 2 major events with the balance beam and the floor exercise final. What are you doing to keep that calf not only when she's going to perform, but before and after to make sure that she's at her optimum, whatever that looks like, because that calf must take a monumental beating within that time frame.
I mean, you're doing everything, right? They might even have you be throwing in PRP. They might even be throwing some stem cells in her during the time. They may be doing something called shockwave. We've had a few of the players that come in. We had a couple high level soccer players, a couple high level basketball players. We do the Seahawks, and they come in and they get this thing called shockwave. And so they do it like when they have injuries like this, and it sort of breaks up the scar tissue and kind of relieves some tension there. So she may be doing something like that. There's probably things I've never even heard of that she's getting treatment on there in Europe. And remember, she's in Europe, right? So they probably have some other things that they don't even have here in the US that they can offer her. I mean, she's
Good
getting
point.
smashed with treatment right now. I mean, there's just no way that she's just sitting around doing nothing. And also, you're forgetting to mention, which again, you're bringing up the most important parts, but she's warming up also, right? Like she's
Yep.
just not going cold turkey and doing those things. And she's going to keep herself warm every day. She's going to do routines every day. She may be chilling out more than average because she's injured and she doesn't want to get more injured and she wants to save it for the actual events.
Yeah.
But I mean, those are still like a few days away, right? Like we're not talking about like this is going to be over in a day or two, right? You're talking about 6 events over a period of time. So yeah, I mean, they're doing everything possible and they're probably consulting, they're probably calling, they probably have all these different people involved in this. This is not a single person treatment option,
Yeah,
and
that's a good
there's
point.
probably been so many people involved in this, which
Yep.
is always really important to understand. Like even you have these team physicians, they're top of their game. I took care of a player that had seen Elytrosh and then flew to see somebody else. And, it's just amazing to hear their stories when they're like, oh, well, this guy operated on me, but I flew to see 3 other people because he's like, I want you to get checked by 3 people before I do your surgery. Like these are the best docs in the world, if not country. And they're still getting these extra opinions because all of us want to make sure we do the right thing for the player or for the patient.
Last thing before I move on, we've heard a lot of different things, right? Before it was, the rest and the ice and things like that. And it seems like we're getting more information now about compression and maybe going away from some of the ice treatments. when it comes to, let's say it's a grade 1 calf strain, what is that treatment? Is it focusing on compression, or it's just besides everything else that you mentioned, but just, what's a maybe go to when she's in the hotel, she's already had her treatment, but they still want her to quote unquote treat it while she's relaxing at the hotel room at the end of the day. What is she doing there?
I mean, they're probably doing massage, they're probably doing grafting, they're probably
So a
doing some
24/7
muscle.
there. Everybody,
Yeah.
it's not a,
I don't think, I
protocol.
mean, I just don't think she's sitting there icing her leg. I mean, the problem is
Yeah,
that ice is really good for like a sore knee, right? Like swelling,
yeah,
intra-articular swelling. I, I as a layman athlete, a recreational athlete, despite being an orthopedic surgeon, I would ice my leg,
yeah,
but that's just because I don't have, even with all the stuff that I see and do, I don't have access to the treatments that she has, nor do I have the time to go get that stuff. And so as a result, I would just do the basic bread and butter, but that's not what she's getting. I mean,
yeah.
she probably has her own nice machine in the room. She's probably
Nah,
getting something we haven't even heard about.
shout
Like
out
there's
to
more
Grant.
than, shout out to Grant. I mean, I just think we can't fathom the type of stuff that she's probably having right now. But you know what the best part is? Maybe we're completely wrong, and maybe she's just so good that she's
Yeah.
getting so little treatment, and she's
I
just
wouldn't
gonna
even
win
be
the
surprised by
Olympics.
it. She's a
Maybe all this
monster.
stuff maybe she watches the show and she says these guys are such
These guys are a
idiots.
bunch of idiots.
I got no treatment and I'm just gonna win regardless.
I'm
You know
rocking
what I
my
mean? That's the whole
PlayStation
point.
5
That's the
right
fun
now.
part about this show where predictions are wrong.
Yeah,
We
yeah,
do our best. We tell everyone, but it's but like LeBron James though, like he's probably
yeah,
got like a hyperbaric chamber he brought with him. So I know he's
yeah.
getting treatment.
Yeah, yeah, and he likes his red wine as well. So maybe it's a little combination there between getting his treatment and a off day with a nice glass of red wine. We'll stick with the gymnastics. Unfortunately, these are serious injuries, and with Sky Blakely and Kayla DeCello with their Achilles injury, really rough. I mean, Achilles injuries, right? That's all we have to pretty much say during the U.S. Olympic gymnastics trials for Kayla.
So I mean,
Let's
you
just
guys are
kind of talk
seeing
about
this.
that. Go ahead.
It's like the when you think of Achilles injuries, and no offense to Will, but we have, it's usually 30, 40, like we don't, the high level athlete injuries are a different animal, right?
Yeah,
They're just, you've seen Aaron Rodgers, but Aaron Rodgers wasn't 25 when he got his injury, right?
yeah.
There's NFL players that get it, but to see I mean,
Kayla's 20 years old, and we're talking
two,
about high level
yeah,
athletes.
these are really
Their
young.
Achilles are
These are really
strong,
young.
right? Go ahead.
It's just
Sorry.
not that common to see this injury in every day. I mean, we see people in their mid 20s to 30s tear
Yeah,
their, but it's usually that like high 20s. We always call it the weekend warrior, right? Like the dad, or it's more men actually. This is different. Obviously, we're talking about two female athletes here, but
yeah.
it's usually higher precipitance of men because they tend to do stupider things.
That's
And
me.
they tend to, wasn't directed at you, Will, but yes.
It was 100%. Just because you're nice about it does not mean it wasn't directed at
Dude,
quote unquote weekend warriors doing dumb things and busting
this
their
is all
legs.
about, I'm just trying to make fun of you the entire time without anybody knowing on the show. So
Oh, I know.
so anyhow, so it's generally the population's generally, like I said, it's weekend warrior. Like I've had friends like that, in late 30s, early 40s, tear their Achilles and then talk about repair, which we will in a second.
Yeah.
But to have young, I mean, one of them was what, 16 or something, or like she's 20 years old, and the other one, I can't remember how
Yeah,
old she
yeah.
was, but these are not
Yeah.
very old. Anyhow, so these are young athletes, but remember what we said before, this is like jumping off a building, right? Like they're going, look at the height that they go. Like we never get to experience that. Like you would never fall at that speed. And it's also a rotational component, right? And then
Yeah.
they have to immediately stop on a dime. And that's usually what happens. It's that abrupt halt. That's what gets any of our things. Like if you think about, we see biceps tendon tears, it's not like the guy is just lifting and all of a sudden he lets go. It's just all of a sudden it goes into an isometric, which means that your muscle has to hold that same strength
Yeah.
without moving. And your tendon gives out because it's either your tendon or your bone snaps. Now, if they were younger and they were like in 16, 14, they
Yeah.
can
They're
pull off
19
the
and
growth
20.
plate.
Just to
But
let the
that's not,
audience know.
that's
19 and
19 and
20.
20. We're talking about really young.
Yeah.
So this is a pretty devastating injury. And we've talked about this before on this show. We've seen examples of this. And you can see this is a long road. I mean, they're out for a year, and are they the same? I mean, they're gonna have to rely on that power spike land, maneuvers with this type of Achilles. It's a really devastating injury. But again, the nice cool thing we've seen now is it used to be, you know, we saw many baseball players that are earlier on, and 10, 15 years ago, get this, and it would take them 2 years to come back, and they never be the same. And
Yeah.
now we've seen some players come back from it, and they've done well, and we'll see how Aaron Rodgers is. Again, Aaron Rodgers is not, he's a great player, but he's not the antithesis of like a hurdler or a gymnast, right? Like he
Yeah.
could sit in the pocket. He was never known as a high impact player, right? Like going for big runs, doing dives, jumping,
Yeah.
things like that. So like
Yeah.
he doesn't need to be. I mean, you saw him. He was for like 6 weeks. He's throwing the ball better than most peak quarterbacks can do,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
He doesn't really need that Achilles to do the things that he does compared to
He just
these
got to move in the
these
pocket.
guys. Yeah, exactly. So Will's going to show this. I know the audience, I don't want them to be too grossed out, but it's kind of interesting to see like kind of the old and the new way. Really briefly, just so the audience can see what it
So
deals
I'm
with.
going to
So you
show,
showed,
just to give everybody a heads up, I'm going to show an Achilles rupture. It's a little gross if you're not used to it. For Dr. Garcia, he has this with some peas and a salad. It's fine with him because he lives it every day. For those that are listening on our podcast, please, it's a great segue to check out our YouTube page, because if you want to see our faces and get grossed out by the next slide, then please check us out. So let's talk about this Achilles rupture here.
all right. So again, audience can see. So these are the same. These are surgeries. So if someone tells you they got their Achilles repaired, this is actually the same surgery. You can obviously see there's a difference here. We've had Dr. Anthony Yee on here. Will's undergone one of these. Thankfully, Will's undergone the one on the right, if you're looking at the screen. But so the one is an open repair. And again, that's a little more of an accentuated repair, but that's what the Achilles looks like when it snaps. And you can see that the white is the tendinous portion, and then it's sewed back together. And you want to make sure you're sewing it so you don't have a lot of knots on the outside or anything else, right? And the issue with this is obviously wound infections and things like that. On the right, and now they don't have the little holes on the bottom for the speed bridge, but this is what Aaron Rodgers got. And again, usually it kind of goes, this is a good one here. Usually you might go a little bit lower with your incision. You might go different orientations, but again, it's small, percutaneous. And then you just fix it down to that bone. That's kind of the newest, hottest way of doing it. And that's the speed bridge you guys keep hearing about.
Down into the heel area, right? That's what,
Yes.
as far as when you say the bone and the suture is connecting.
That's where that like blue mark is. You can see that's where the heel bone is going to be going roughly. And the reason is, you can see here, tendon to tendon's great. But what the Arthrex team and other people have figured out is that, usually it actually tears a little bit lower. And when it tears lower, the tendon that's connected to the heel bone, which is the lowest part. And again, I'm sorry, I can't show you because I can't point. It's really not good quality. And what we've seen is there are people that can be treated without surgery. There's people that are older, or people that are really patient, or okay with maybe not the high impact power plays. And so they keep their ankle like this, and then slowly over time. Now, again, for an athlete, if it was me, I'd get it fixed, right? I want to get back faster. I can't sit in the OR for 10 weeks in a boot and be okay with it. Yeah. And so you want to go back quicker. And so by having this sort of enhanced bridge and then being able to fix it to bone, it's stronger. Like if you can get bone to tendon healing, it's always better than the tendon to tendon approach. Less scarring, faster recovery. And so that's what the whole purpose of this is. So anyhow, so they're probably undergoing that. I'm hoping they're undergoing the right one, which is the percutaneous. I can sure bet that one of them is probably going to be seeing Dr. Elatrosh sometime soon. Yeah. We've already seen he's the master of everything. We need to have an entire episode on him. But anyhow, so that's what's going to be undergoing. And it's going to be a long recovery. And, there's going to be their different ups and downs, but, hopefully they're still young, and hopefully we can see them again in 4 years. And Los Angeles, right?
Yeah. And, before we move on, as we mentioned, right, 19 and 20, one of them, Kayla, was part of the championship team last year, and pretty sure was expecting to go and compete with her teammates and try to bring home a gold for the U.S. gymnastics team. And we talk about injuries, we talk about knees and Achilles and things like that. But what that mental preparation, some of the concerns are when you have these young athletes, that this is possibly their career, even though they're young. We know that gymnastics, obviously Simone is 27. She's different. She's, she's LeBron. She's on a whole other, out of our galaxy. But for a lot of these, athletes, their careers, end at an early age. And, if as a doctor, as someone that, knows this, what are some of your concerns with the mental status, and what is something that you can do or encourage the patient to do when you know that they're going to be rough days? You are laid up, you're immobile, you're watching on TV your dreams. You're not, sitting there for a week or two. This is a long recovery. What are some of your concerns as a doctor? And if you had to share with some of our listeners, what do you recommend if you're struggling mentally with something like this?
I mean, we're going to need to have an entire episode on this. This is a great topic. I think the mental health of recovery is humongous, and it's completely not talked about. If you watch our previous episodes, this probably comes up frequently. And I made it wasn't a joke, but I made a point that I'm basically 2/3 surgeon and 1/3 therapist, even though my wife thinks that's funny because she would say you're not a very good therapist, but nonetheless,
She's biased.
She's biased. That's true. So anyhow,
She's
there
not
is a lot
listening
of
to me,
therapy.
right? I don't want to get in trouble here. But anyway, go ahead.
No, we're good. We're good. So basically, I'm just dealing with everyday athletes, right? I mean, we had some young kids today that came in that have meniscus tears we're going to have to do surgery on, and tell them, you're out 5 months, right? Like everything that you wanted to do, done. You're stopping.
Yeah.
Baseball player, Tommy John, you're done. That junior season you had, it's out. You're not doing it. It stinks, right? You're telling the parents, you're telling the kids, and it's just, the surgery, that's the easy part, right? Like you go to sleep, you wake up, let me do my job, and then you start the recovery, and you have pain for a few weeks, and then you get back. And I'm not trying to belittle the pain and the recovery, but
No. Yeah.
I mean, Will, you've gone to this. I've undergone surgery. Like the surgery part sucks, but like that's not the hardest part. It's the mental part, right? And so, and we're talking about like just being annoyed because we can't go play basketball or play with our friends. These are the people that have been training for this particular thing, and they can no longer do it. And they're not pro athletes where they can be out for a year and still get paid. Right? Like, I mean, they're professionals, but they're not the same as these NFL players that don't have guarantees on their contracts and or these NBA or whatever. And so they're going to need mental health coaches. I mean, we've seen it in shows. We've seen it in, you heard it on there. I mean, Simone Biles, right? Mental health, the Tipsies,
there it
all
is.
these other things. Mental health is huge. And almost every athlete now has a sports psychologist that's available to them. And if you are doing athletics and you're having trouble with things, listen, this is not a athlete only issue, right? Like there was a huge article on this for surgeons. I mean, we're put under extreme stresses sometimes in the OR. You're dealing with athletes like this. You're trying to fix, you want to get them back. And if they don't get back, you feel sad. You're upset about it. Even though the success rate on some of these surgeries is 80%. That means 20% of the players that you operate on will not get back. And there's absolutely nothing you can do about it, right? Nothing you can do about it. So it's the same thing with these, they have to, and I think that this is important. I think that it's completely underappreciated. And until recent with some of these athletes that have come out and said, they have these mental health issues, no one wants to talk about it. It was considered sort of, which is sick to say, is weak. If you came out and said you had the mental issues, if you said that you were having a tough time, but the worst part about this is it happens to everybody. It happens for the surgeons. It happens to everybody. You feeling like you got to do better. You could do better on the next one, right? I don't remember like half my successes, right? Like I operate on a lot of people. I take care of people. I can tell you right now, I remember every single one of the failures.
Yeah.
And that's the same way they're going to be. They're not going to remember the 15 competitions they won. They're going to remember the time that they were sitting there on the couch with their Achilles recovery. And so I don't know. It's a long-winded answer because obviously this is a little more personal, clearly. But I think for them,
it's tough.
The sports psychologist is important.
Yeah, I think that's the big part because, right, your surgery ends, you're like, all right, I'm gonna rock this. I'm gonna be gun ho about it. I'm gonna get him. I can, right, and you just, especially if that you had that mindset, I'm just gonna just go after it. Time is a mofo, and you're like that for a couple weeks. All of a sudden, you start to feel it, right? And you start to, you're going through, even as you're doing things to try to benefit. Eventually, you're sitting there and you're like, man, this is rough, because sometimes not even yourself, but you see that it's affecting the people around you, right? If you have responsibilities, if like for myself, when I got hurt, I see my wife doing all the stuff, and I can't do certain things, and things like that, and all of this extra stress is falling on other people, and that's a whole other thing besides what you're personally going through. So without going into so much as we already have, I think the point is that whether you're an athlete or someone just getting surgery tomorrow morning, be aware of that, and reach out, get a support system, especially if it's a long-term injury, because you're going to have some ups and downs, and you want to have a support system there to kind of help you through that, no matter how strong you are. So
I think, and I don't want to go any more because I think I think, well, I've just added another topic for one of our podcasts. This is a
I wrote
really
it
good
right here.
one.
Look, for people that are
Dude,
home, I wrote in my yellow pad, it says mental health therapist as one of our next shows. So
so
sports
yeah, this will be a good
therapist.
show. I think the audience is going to love this one. But
Yeah.
basically, be honest with yourself. That's one. Two, understand that everybody feels that way. That's one thing I like to do in the office, being like, the girl before you was just upset. The guy before you was upset
Yeah.
that he had to go through this. Like, you're
Yeah.
not alone, right? You're not even alone today, right?
Yeah.
Which is good. And then I think the biggest thing you understand is that you will get there if you persevere, and you have to be okay with different things. You got to be able to have the options in your head, but it's hard. I mean, like you said, you're in isolation despite what you want to do. But anyhow, we'll move on. This is going to be a great topic for another time. I think we could talk an entire hour on this, if not more.
Yeah.
And maybe find a really good mental health sports psychologist to come on the show at some point too, because I think
We
that
will
this is
we will get one on, and anyone listening, I want to come join the show and be a part of our show, check us out, sportsdoctalk.com. We have on our website not only all of our podcasts, but great information Dr. Garcia provides. We have transcripts of the show. So if you get tired of listening to my voice, you can just read what we're talking about. And more importantly, if you want to be a part of the show, on our webpage, you can reach out to us. And if it all works out, we would love to have you. We've been blessed with some great guests already. We're going to move on. We're going to go to your fun spot, your warm spot, ACL injuries. It's like ACL and shoulder injuries are like Dr. Garcia's favorite. I don't know. Maybe they're all his favorite here. But let's talk about
secretly they're all my favorite. Secretly,
they all
I
are.
do not discriminate against injuries.
Yeah.
Everybody's allowed.
Cameron Brink's ACL injury. She tore ACL just a month before the Paris Olympics. Really a blow to her team. And I mean, and maybe we'll get into this in a second here. Having this ACL injury, coming out of Stanford, graduating, one of the best players in college, rebounds, points, blocks. She was one by far, right? Everyone talks about Caitlin Clark and Angel Reese. Cameron Brink was a superb college athlete and was going to have a tremendous rookie year for the Sparks. Let's talk about this ACL injury and what this involves. We're talking about another young athlete here, but what does this ACL injury involve? Just talk about that, and then we'll get into the recovery process.
Yeah, I mean, we've all heard about this with all these players. I mean, the ACL keeps coming up on this thing. We talk about all the different surgery options she has and everything else. But again, she tears her ACL. You can see there, it's one of the most commonly torn ligaments. It's the one you hear about all in the news with these athletes. So she's going to tear this. She's going to be out, 7-8 months. She'll get probably a reconstruction. I know there's other fancy things we talked about, but not an athlete at this level yet. And again, the interesting thing though is it's women's basketball, so we haven't brought that up as much. We've had a lot of NFL players we've talked about, and what people don't understand, and what I see actually a higher amount, is female athletes coming in with ACL tears. So female athletes are 2 to 8 times higher tear risk than men, and that's really important for people to understand, because I do a lot of ACLs, and I would tell you that this is very true. And it's really high in basketball, but the highest in soccer. And so a lot of
Yep.
soccer. So when soccer season comes, unfortunately, it's a lot of and it's young girls too. I mean, Cameron Brink, despite her being in the WNBA, is she's still young, right?
Yeah.
She's
Yeah. Just a
she's a
rookie.
young girl.
Yeah.
Yeah. So again, and it's because of the way that it's not because they're female male, but it's because of the way they land. They landed more valgus. They have some rotation. They tend to have smaller notches, which means that's what the area where the ACL sits. It kind of impinges. And also women tend to be more lax. So they tend to have more flexibility. And so that means that their ligaments are a little bit looser, but allows them to do other things, right? They're a lot more flexible. They can do things like that. But again, and for Cameron Brink, who's so tall, it could have put her at more risk. But again, it's also just bad luck, right?
Yeah.
Like people ask me all the time, they're like, well, why did this happen? I mean, I have a couple of my friends, they were like insanely good skiers. They made it through their entire career, no ACL tear. Then they're 35 at Whistler and they fall and they tear their ACL. And they're like, why'd that happen? I'm like, listen, it's just bad luck.
Yeah.
So a lot of times we just can't explain why it happens.
So the anatomy, the hormonal, and the biomechanics of the woman athlete is slightly different than the male, and that does play a part, or at least the numbers or the stats or studies show that they tend to be higher in female when it comes to ACL injuries compared to male. Did I say that right?
Yes. Yes. And what we also know is that because that information is important, it's important that teams and understand that you can also prevent these. So by doing prehab or by doing injury workouts, by teaching females to not fall into so much valgus, there's different things you can do to prevent it. Now, obviously, someone like Cameron Brink has probably been doing that, right? Like there's no way that
Yeah.
she gets to that level and they're not preparing her to avoid her from getting injured. But nonetheless, all of our shows segue into something different, right? Like we start off with a topic and then
Yep.
sometimes we go off the deep end and
We always
sometimes we
go off
go
the
into
deep
a
end.
different direction. So anyhow,
It's because you're a
it's important
swimmer.
for them.
We go off the deep end.
Dude, no pun intended. That's right.
Okay,
But
so I
anyhow,
got a
so
question for you
yeah.
here. All right. Very different. I think it's the only sport, and I'm not putting much thought to it, so someone's definitely going to correct me on this, right? But college basketball, depending how deep you go in, right? And I was thinking about this with Caitlin Clark, but now even talking about this with Cameron, she played all the way through into the playoffs, March Madness, finished, got drafted, and played professional basketball in a month, maybe 5 weeks. It's the same thing with Cameron, right? Played in the tournament, had a full season going back to the beginning of the college basketball season, got a month off, probably less because it probably went right into practicing. You get out of the tournament, you get drafted, you go right to your team, and then the games start up 2 weeks later or something like that, right after the draft, or a couple weeks later after the draft. Does that amount of playing, and like I say, it could always go back to just bad luck, but the fatigue for a starting basketball player where you are clearly the best player in Iowa for Caitlin Clark, or Stanford like Cameron, where you are have the bulk of the minutes and playing the most because that gives your teams the best opportunity to win. Having all of that basketball that's going on, could that add to something like this happen, or do we go back to, well, you just kind of shit out of luck a little bit?
I would say maybe I used to would have say yes. The more low, the quicker turnaround is there. But we're not talking about days. We're talking about weeks, right? Like most of us, like if you sit around on the couch for 2 weeks, like your body actually is worse, right? So I don't know if that quick turnaround is I don't think, in my opinion, I don't think that that's the reasoning. I think that the higher amount of games puts her at a higher risk to potentially tear their ACL. Right. And so they had more games in that season. But again, Caitlin Clark didn't do it. So it doesn't mean that I don't know there's a stat on that to show that that's causing that. I think
Bigger
if there
player
was,
also,
they would
right?
have.
Caitlin Clark's a guard. We're talking about a taller, a center, right? I'm not sure if it all plays, but I like the point that you're bringing up a great point. It's the number of games, right? Because think about it. If you think about her college career, I don't know what she did in high school or AAU or anything like that, but by far, at least in her college career, she's played the most amount of games in a calendar year because she didn't end her college basketball season and then have that break or whatever she would do afterwards before the next
Yeah.
fall. She went right into a WNBA season.
That's true. And again, also the best players usually drive their teams to win. So they're usually probably finishing in the March Madness also. So anyhow, I don't think that's the exact reasoning. It's always load management is always important. It depends on probably the players too. We've seen that too with football, right? Like running backs are more load management, wide
Yeah, yeah.
receivers, other guys you're not as worried about. So
All right, let's move on to a couple other athletes. Man, I think we're just full of great news, right? Just talking about all these injuries for these great athletes. So we apologize if it seems a little bit morbid, but this is what we do. We talk about injuries and not only
well, you don't. I mean, you don't need me to tell you about who won the gold medals. You go on the news.
Yeah,
If you want
no,
to
we're
hear about
talking
the
about
injuries, then you can come to us.
Exactly. And we're still talking about the Olympics. Let's go. Shalise Jones and Alicia Monsoon, they had meniscus tears in their knee. Can you talk about the difference between a meniscus tear and tearing your ACL?
Yeah. So can you pull that picture up again? That was
Sure.
good. So, different recoveries, different prognoses. They can come in. So first off, we've talked about this a few times, probably on some of the earlier episodes. So it might be good for us to rehash this again. The
Yep.
problem you have is a lot of times with the injury report, you don't get information on the meniscus, right? So they'll say the Cameron Brink tore ACL, but did she tear something else in the meniscus? And if she did, that puts her at higher risk for other issues. You can see here that's the meniscus is the two cushions of the knee, and then the ACL is in the middle. The ACL gets a lot of publicity. It's kind of the sexy ligament. It's the most commonly torn one.
Yep.
But honestly, the meniscus is way more common. If I would say, like, even the last 2 weeks, I've probably seen like 7 ACL tears and I've probably seen like 15 meniscus tears, because the meniscus tears is just more, the most common surgery we do is a meniscus surgery. So it's just way more common.
So
that being
real quick,
said,
so for Shalise Jones, which is another gymnast, her having this meniscus tear, is this better or worse than the injuries that her other gymnastics teammates have suffered through?
So that is a loaded question, which may go off on a tangent, and I know we're running out of time.
We're
So
never running out of
it
time.
depends on where the tear is. It depends on what type of tear it is.
How are we
right?
running
Like
out of time already? Okay, I
it's
digress. I'm
it's
sorry.
because you and me do this. This is okay. So and then we'll talk about this crack that Monsoon felt, because this is a really interesting. So basically, you have friends that have had meniscus tears. They go in there, they do a little cleanup. Yeah, that's fine.
Yeah, yeah.
Those are sort of like the simple tears, little para tears, little radial tears. But the tear that you're even seeing here, this is a radial tear. Those are kind of nasty, because when you take one of those out, that's equivalent to removing the entire meniscus. And that's when you run into problems, right? And we're going to go on one of these that's had problems. Lonzo Ball. This is exactly what happened to Lonzo Ball. Meniscus tear, cleaned up, which we're going to go into this in 1 second on Monsoon in one of the articles they talked about. And then again, a problem. And then guess what happened? He developed a cartilage hole and he had no meniscus left. So what was he end up getting? Which we have not talked about as the meniscus transplant, but he got a meniscus transplant and a cartilage transplant, which the meniscus was not announced until recently. They just mentioned the cartilage portion, which is a game changer for the whole procedure. And so, yes, it's uncommon, right? Lonzo Ball is the first NBA player to get this, but it's one of those risks you have. So if you get a nasty one, it doesn't heal and you get problems, they go down faster. Generally, the ACL players, if you can get the ACL stabilized, they don't get that risk of arthritis as much. The meniscus one is a much worse thing if it goes. So basically, if it goes well for both, you're good. ACLs go well more often. The meniscus can heal, but the long term of the meniscus sometimes is increased arthritis a little bit more than the ACL. Does that make sense? That was trying to be as best I can. And again, it depends on what you have to do.
That was good. That made sense. And then for Alicia Monsoon, 2021 Olympian in the 10,000 meters, she felt a quote unquote, I'm doing air quotes if you're not watching, she felt a crack in her knee doing a run, which then turned out to be a medial meniscus tear. So why don't you talk about the differences there?
So that's what you see here, that red thing.
Crack there. So what does
that
mean?
That's not a good sign. So that's not good. That's not a good one. You don't want to hear that word. So crack generally means a pop. And generally with meniscus tears, there's ones that are little. They get little tears, little fraying, and that's the ones that get cleanups, or they're usually small. A crack or a pop is usually a big radial tear, which is right there. A radial tear means like it looks like someone cut with the scissors like this. right across the meniscus.
Okay.
And generally those are not good and those need to be fixed. And the reason you fix them, which I just mentioned earlier, is if you don't fix them, the only way to take care of them is to remove the entire meniscus. And that is not ideal. It happens. I see patients all the time that have
Are
had
they
full
putting an
meniscus
internal
removed.
brace in there? What are they doing with that meniscus?
So we have to fix it. So you do essentially an internal brace, you fix it, and it's actually kind of a fancy thing. You do like a rip stop. It looks like a little checker pattern. So one days we'll pull up one of the things and show how we fix one of these, but it's not simple. Not everybody does it like this.
Okay.
But you want to save the meniscus if you can. But again, it's not always a successful procedure. But let's mention something that her coach mentioned when they asked about this, right? You said she looked at quicker fixes, but it would have led to significant problems down the road. So we committed to the long-term full recovery,
Mm,
right? So when you hear that, there's two things here. 6-month recovery. That's not a meniscus cleanup, right? That's it. That is a meniscus repair.
yeah.
And they looked at quicker fixes. So a lot of the players in the professional sports get quick fixes. So quick fix is the meniscus cleanup. You've seen a player knee cleanup, knee wash, something like that, and they're like back in 6 weeks. Those are meniscus cleanups. The problem is it leads to significant, where we've been knowing this and it's getting more and more obvious that when you have these really bad tears like a radial tear, it's not best for the athlete to just remove it, right? And we used to do that a lot earlier on.
Yeah.
Thankfully not in my time, but even before that. And the problems down the road are the worst case scenario, which is what you saw from Lonzo Ball. That is the worst case scenario. Well, actually, that's not the worst case scenario. The worst case scenario is some of the NFL players I've seen after the NFL that retire at 27 that have
Yeah.
bone arthritis, right? That's the worst case.
Yeah,
But the
because
second
we
worst
still
case,
haven't figured out the arthritis portion of that. That's the medical science. That's the golden goose, right? If we ever figure out how to eliminate that arthritis.
well, that's also what we do. I mean, that is the golden goose, and we're getting a little bit better, and we can go on that another tangent. But
Yeah.
the thing is that like they're one of my specialties. If you see what I do, and this is becoming a more common, it's still not that common, and why people like to hear this stuff and I talk about all the time, it's called cartilage restoration. So how do we restore the cartilage, or how do we save the cartilage? So the number one way to save the cartilage is, if you look on all my posts, there's a hashtag save the meniscus. There's a reason we do that, right? Save the meniscus here is so important. So that's why they're vowing that she saves the meniscus. And the crazy thing is these young patients can do really well. I mean, I just told the 15-year-old today that I don't know if I can fix her meniscus, but even if it looks like it needs to be fixed, I'm going to fix it because I'm going to see what happens. Because with a 15-year-old, the blood supply is so good. 26-year-olds are kind of the same, right? I would rather throw a Hail Mary pass and know that it's a 60% success rate, because if I don't try it, it's 0%.
Yeah. You already know the outcome.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And how old was this patient? Young woman?
Mine was 15 today, but we're talking about months and she's
Yeah.
26. I mean, they're still young.
Yeah. And what about as a runner? 10,000 meters? This is what she competes in. Did you see something like that? Or, you go, well, let's just kind of fix things, and depending on how you heal and if everything goes right, then we could discuss whether, you're going back to running these distances again.
Well, and they can
From
do
that
these other
point.
things. I mean, now you can do ultrasounds. You can do these. They have these special in-office scopes you can do. You basically put a tiny needle in with a camera, and they can actually see if it healed. Like, there's other things they can do before they release her if they really want to do
I
that.
got
It doesn't. They're going to do every check on her before they feel comfortable with letting her rip. But we've seen with these newer techniques, we can get these things to heal. It's just the number one thing is getting to it quickly, right? The longer you wait, the more it stretches out. And the more that once everything stretches out, it's like, imagine like a water sack, like a balloon. Once you blow it up for so long, it won't always contract back.
Yeah.
So you want to get that thing back. And usually I say 6 weeks, sometimes even sooner. Like if someone comes to my office and I have an opening, I'll do it in a week or two. Like you just got to get it done.
I got you.
So that's what happened here. So
And,
again, we're almost
some
out of
good
time,
news,
but
right? It's good news. Long recovery, but Derrick Rose had something like this. Roger Federer, for you tennis fans, had something like this. And obviously, Federer is one of the great tennis players of all time. And Derrick Rose came back to become a contributing NBA player, never back to the MVP status. But, if you can have an entire career in the NBA, to me, that's a pretty good thing. We can go on and on, but we're going to start wrapping it up because we talk too much.
Once again,
doing
we
stuff.
said, I told you before the show, I said 30 minutes, and this is what happened. I know it. I knew it.
All right. We're talking Olympics, Dr. Garcia. You ready for a trivia question?
Oh, here we go.
All right. I think you're going to get this. You're going to be close, right? So, Paris, this is the third time that Paris has hosted the Summer Olympics. There is one other city that has hosted the Olympics 3 times. What city would have hosted the Summer Olympics 3 times? Now it's Paris and this other city that have done it 3 times.
London.
London is the answer.
First time ever.
1908.
First time ever. Everyone's got to hear this. First time ever I got it correct.
1908, 1948, and then in 2012. So you have stumped the trivia question. That was our Olympic question. And maybe it's another 4 years before you get it right again. So
it's going to be, that's right. I'm going to have to do, we're at 3 years right now. So I got 1 more year and then I get a pass. Then we're good.
We just want to remind everybody, please check us out at sportsdoctalk.com. We really appreciate everyone. Check us out in your favorite listening podcast, whether it's Apple and Spotify and iHeart and you name it, we're on there. The same jibber jabber. If you're listening to us, check out our YouTube page. We really appreciate. Once again, shout out to Recovery Shop. We really appreciate them, and for all the surgeons who are interested in participating, feel free to reach out to the Recovery Shop. The link is on our website. The link is on Dr. Garcia's website, or you can check out their website at shop-recovery.net. I don't know. What else? Did I leave anything else out, Dr. Garcia?
No, I mean, I know we were slow in the summer, but just, we have a lot more in store for everybody. So thanks for listening. Thanks for watching. Enjoy the Olympics. And after this, we're going to get back to more orthopedics.
Real quick. What are you going to watch? What's the one go-to? What's your go-to? What about your wife? What she got to go to? Or she's like, leave me alone, get out of my way?
We're swimming. I'm a swimmer. I like the swimming. And I'm going to watch the gymnastics.
Oh, I gotta watch Simone. It's absolutely amazing. Oh, by the way, for you rugby,
I like the kayaking. I like the kayaking. We're gonna get off topic, but I like I don't want to go any further with this, but I like the kayaking. That's so cool.
We got 2 minutes to go further. We love the kayak. Kayaking is awesome. Rugby fans, the women, and like I said, I have no idea what the results would be by the time we listen to the show, but the women rugby team have made the medal round. It's the first time the men or women have ever made the medal round for rugby. To shout out to a sport that doesn't get enough love. I figured that you were going to watch the breakdancing competition, but maybe you'll just stick to swimming there.
Skateboarding, who knows?
Thank you, Dr. Garcia. I appreciate it, man. Have a good one. And by the way, we've got Arthrex folks coming in. We got some really cool tools and stuff that we're going to talk about. We're going to get ready for our kickoff season, 2024 NFL season. We're going to talk Chubb. We'll talk Aaron Rodgers. We got Joe Burrow coming back. We've got an exciting fall season coming ahead. So we're really excited. We're going to have guests. You name it. We'll talk about it and we'll do our thing. Will Sanchez, Dr. Garcia, thank you very much. Say bye to the audience, Dr. Garcia.
Bye, guys. Thanks for listening.